Should we just dive straight into the
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
about your book?
Let's go.
Here it
There's the
is.
book.
There's the book. I'm pretty much finished it now.
Oh, great.
I'm the world's slowest and worst reader. Um, but
Well,
now
it's
we are
something we have
getting.
in common.
I think it's because I have about 10 books I read at once, which is never a good idea. So, this guy on the front. Now, he is the god of, is it war and accountancy?
Yeah, war and accounting. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, now that's
Accounting
just.
in English. Yeah, I mean in
I,
American.
I think that is just superb for a god of war and accountancy. You've got in
Yeah,
the book a story about how he gets that name. Do you want to just explain who this guy is so that everyone can
yeah. Well,
understand?
Guangdong or Guangdi is many people have seen him in the back of Chinese restaurants. He's up on. He's often he's a little red statue. Uh, with an inflamed liver. He's like a belt. His right side where his liver is inflamed, showing his his strength and power, but also his ability to get really angry.
Mm-hmm.
And he's there, kind of just saying, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, and reminding people that he's in a sense he's a god of business. Because he's reminding people to keep track of the money carefully. He's one of the heroes. He was a real person, and he's one of the heroes of the Three Kingdoms stories, which were like codified in like a final version that we have today. It was written down in the 1590s, but actually the stories were told from it's a period around 200, 300 current era, that there were these three kingdoms and they were fighting each other. And he's a god who died in like being extremely loyal, basically. That's, he doesn't come off as the smartest guy, but he was a great warrior. And at one point he was imprisoned by Cao Cao, who was also a real character, who has actually played a really important role in the beginnings of early Taoism. But Cao Cao is the Chinese devil in a sense. If you say to someone in Chinese, you say the devil made me do it. You don't say that. You say Cao Cao made me do it, because he's like this evil general. So in the theater, they always show him as the really cruel, evil guy from the Three Kingdoms. This Three Kingdoms epic. And Guangdong was captured at one point by Cao Cao, and the jailers fed him, because you never know, right? He is general. He might end up the one in power someday. So you double. You're hedging your bets. So they fed him, but he kept exact track of how much they were feeding him, and then paid them exactly what for that when they released him. So he became the god of accounting as well. And he's one of the sworn brothers, basically, of the Three Kingdoms.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so your book, Possible Origins, is subtitled Cultural History of Chinese Martial Arts, Theatre and Religion. If I'm a guy who's just been going to my local Tai Chi class for the past 4 weeks, what does this mean to me? and how do I connect what I'm doing in my YMCA gym to the kind of the incredibly detailed and very deep history that you present for Chinese martial arts in this book?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I think I think what you get from me is I'm a little over the top. in that sense. I'm basically saying, there's a lot of people who've been interested in Chinese martial arts for a long period of time, not just 4 weeks. If you're in it for 4 weeks, you're lost, man. You just fell into the well. But this book is really for people who got bit by the bug and got in deep enough, and then they start looking around. They go, that story just doesn't make sense. That doesn't really fit. And so what I've got from people who have read the book is they often say things like, yeah, that answered so many questions that I had just put on the back burner because nobody had answers to.
Yeah. I think there's I've been involved in Chinese martial arts for not as long as you, but a very long time. I'm actually 400 years old, just look really good.
I'm 600.
There are, when you start Chinese martial arts, there's a lot of stuff that you just do that you don't question. And you do this because your teacher does this, because his teacher did this. And a lot of it's very odd. And you don't really think about that until someone stops and says, well, why do we make this strange symbol with our hands? Or why do we do this form where one of the movements is you kind of do a big horse dance and
yes,
and then you kind of read the history that you've presented here about actors presenting themselves on stage and making an entrance, and you kind of go, oh, I'm announcing myself, and a lot of the moves that you thought, well, you have to have this detailed martial application for every single bit of the things you're doing, suddenly have a different meaning. Do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, well, so what I did in the book is I said, wow, okay, what we have here is a subject that was originally a part of a theater, it was martial skill, and it was religion. It was all these things together. It wasn't a separate thing. And to see that, you have to, you're looking, if you're, what we're doing is we're looking back through a filter of the 20th century, or you could, what I call the YMCA consensus, what I started calling after I wrote the book. That, there's this thing that happened in the 20th century that separated theater, martial arts, and religion. But we put that aside for a moment and just say, well, what was it? Well, it was those things combined. So my first 3 sections of the book, one is looking at martial skills from the point of view of religion and theater. So you take any individual martial skill and you can understand it as theater, you can understand it as religion. And then the second section looks at theater and says, well, you can take this, anything that is theatrical there, and look at it from as religion, or you can look at it as martial skill. And then I take religion and I do the same thing. I look at it from the point of view of theater, and I look at it from the point of view of martial skill. So if you take an individual movement like horse stance, or bow and arrow stance, or cat stance, these basic Shaolin stances, they have roles in the theater. So the horse stance is actually for playing the general's role. You're holding a very particular stance, and it's a very particular presence that allows you to improvise character. And a lot of the theater was improvisational. They wrote down these epics, but the people performing them, that's all they did. It wasn't like a part-time job. And they did the same stories. They had a huge repertoire, but they did do the same stories over and over. So they improvised them. And the formality, it was a wildly different context. Sometimes you're just at people's houses. Sometimes you were doing street theater. Sometimes you were you were paid for a religious event. I just went all the way, I jumped right off. But people realized right away that there are things which have religious significance.
Yeah, I mean, but when you say religious significance, it doesn't mean what we think it means, does it? The idea of religion, the Western view, is actually a bit different to the Chinese view.
Yeah. So the Western view is the Christian view, essentially, and really the Protestant view, which is that belief is central. So they will even summarize the question as, what are your beliefs? And Chinese religion is just not organized that way. Chinese religion is, in fact, is theater. It's a kind of theater and the most common experience of religion was going to see a performance, which was called putting on a show for the gods. It's just another way of just saying theater. And they would take the statues out of the temples, and they would take them in procession to the theater. And these processions might last several days, and they do exorcisms to all the businesses and maybe even all the houses along the way. The people carrying them would be these, the rough and tumble kind of youngsters in the community who were sort of given this job, and they would paint their faces in like as demon generals and go into some kind of trance. Of course, the word of trance is English, is not a perfect equivalent in this case, but they were, they didn't talk. There were things they wouldn't. There were restrictions, all sorts of restrictions on their behavior, and they were continuously in character. So yeah, and they would deliver them, right? And then they would actually deliver the gods to the theater and then put on these shows. And they were doing martial dances. This was actually, 2 days of marching in essence, but like low marches, like doing Baguazhang walks or Xingyi walks, things like that.
So that is where we're saying that. Well, that's where you're presenting a theory that is the origin of China's martial arts.
No, actually, what I'm saying is that that's just part of a whole complex of different behaviors. Because you're a kid and you're watching all these heroes on the stage and they're fighting. I mean, these kung fu plays are. I mean, it's a fight scene. Every scene is a fight scene, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's continuous fighting, and so those are your heroes, and that's what you do. But there's so many other types of rituals. For instance, I have an account from the 1920s or so, where this guy had gone and just interviewed villagers about the different rituals they were doing, and they described this one for the 8 Immortals, where they would take a guy. It was like a game, right? It was a trance game. So they'd lay him on the ground, and they would march around him chanting incantations, right? I don't know, sprinkling things on him and stuff, and like for an hour or something, and then suddenly he would pop up as a god, and they would say, and they would, they'd offer him incense or something, and they ask, who are you, a martial god or a civil god? What's your name? Who are you? And because the gods are all divided into martial and civil gods. So if there's a civil god, they bring paper and pen, or maybe a sandbox with a stick to write in, and he would compose something, or maybe do medical healings, which would be writing prescriptions or make talismans. If it was a martial god, they'd say, "Would you like disciples? Would you like some disciples?" And they'd say, "Yes." And then they take them to sort of an open field and bring a bunch of young kids, and they learn kung fu from the god. And after a couple hours, a ritual expert would sort of step in and sprinkle, go, take a talisman, write a talisman out, burn it, put it in water, and go, and spray him, and he'd fall backwards, and they'd catch him. And then he'd say, "Hey, what happened?" Right? They have no memory. This is
right.
Part of the ritual tradition. And when you're possessed by a god, you have no memory of it. And they'd say, "You were just this god. You taught the kids this amazing, kung fu. They're all going to be great heroes now." And who was that god? Maybe that was UFA, right? UFA was like a popular theater god. And I know you do Xingyi. There's all this stuff about, maybe Xingyi came from UFA. Like the early texts say this. There's a controversy about Tai Chi coming from UFA too. But it's just a total misunderstanding. It's not the guy UFA. It's the god of theater UFA. It's the one that everybody actually knew as a god of theater. And he came through trance or through imitation. And UFA actually is the god Garuda, the winged bird. It's like a reincarnation of Garuda. That's the storyline. That's what I'm saying. It's not a person. It's an actual storyline. Garuda got reborn as UFA because Garuda, is this giant bird that guards the Buddha when the Buddha's speaking. And what happened is a bat flew right near the Buddha and farted, a female bat, and farted in his face. So Garuda killed the bat, and then so because Garuda had to killed somebody, even though doing it protecting the Buddha, but if you kill someone, then so Garuda had to be reborn as a human to live a more righteous life.
Well, that's certainly not as glamorous as the legend of Yufei, the general who sacrificed himself for the nation. He proved. Well, I'm just thinking back to my own lineage of Xingyi, and the way it was explained to me would be that. Okay, no one really knows if he was actually the founder, but presumably he was actually the founder. He was the kind of virtuous figure who sacrificed himself. He could have started a revolution. He was a war hero. He was captured. Very, very similar to this guy, which is why I was.
Exactly. Yes, he's a god of loyalty, and he's they're about to torture him, I think, and he takes off his shirt and he shows the tattoo.
The tattoo that his mother did when he was a baby because he was so nationalistic. Yeah.
But that's not really why you had tattoos. You had tattoos because you were like a slave in the military. But it's no. There's a guy writing about this right now. But it's pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, but I think the point of the legend was that he was very virtuous, and that was what was being. They were trying to pass on was this upright, noble being, and that was why he was kind of used in that context. But I mean, I don't know. Who knows?
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing about Chinese culture, right? I mean, they'll go on and on about virtue, but then you suddenly find out you're talking to a fox spirit, and they actually get all your money. I mean, it's not. There's a sense of humor that easily gets lost.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I mean, transplanting anything from one culture to another, it's everything just gets lost and rebranded in their own style. Which brings me on to another point, which is that a popular criticism of the book is that no Chinese martial arts teacher ever tells you this stuff. They're like nobody legitimate who's teaching legitimate self-defense skills suddenly stops and says, by the way, this is all about some flying bat who farted on the Buddha. I mean, it just you can see that doesn't work very well as a marketing strategy for my deadly martial art that I'm practicing. The idea that this was by a bodyguard to the emperor in the palace who had to deal with violence on a daily basis and came up with this martial art that that is a more credible, or this martial art was used to defend my village and that's it. So where's the criticism that well, the criticism is that your theory is so far removed from what everyone else says that you're the kind of the outlier, and how can it be true?
Oh yeah, well there you go. You could just dismiss people because they're outliers, but
Yeah.
but actually, people were so removed from actual violence that they want. They rely on a type of storytelling that is just not the kind of storytelling you tell when you're immersed in violence. When you're immersed in violence, you're telling jokes about it.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah.
You
You
know,
hear World War One stories about the same thing, don't you?
yeah, I mean, see, if you talk to people who've just come back from war, well, first of all, you're probably going to need to buy them several drinks, but they're going to start telling you the funny stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
And that seriousness. Really, I'll just say it frankly. It's a type of fascism. That we could call it nationalism. But it emerged in the 20th century. Just make it really simple. That the Chinese, developed the Western Cartesian split, the mind-body split in the early 20th century, and and they decided to get serious. So you see, in religion, you see this separation, intense separation from what was happening before. The Chinese are total collaborators in it, but it really is imposed by a kind of Protestantism that conquered the country. Chiang Kai-shek, Sun Yat-sen were Protestant leaders, and they redefined religion as the five categories. Protestantism, Catholicism. They have two Christian versions, right? Islam, Buddhism, and Taoism. And they just took Confucianism off the map. They're like, no, that was pure rationality, which is absurd. But that just erased, those five religions just erases the entirety of theater as a religious tradition, or martial arts for that matter, as a religious tradition. And this happened in the new country that had this kind of fascist or nationalist approach to governance, came out of the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion was 1900, and the new government was in 1911. And the Boxer Rebellion is actually there's been these massive wars, like the Taiping Rebellion and many other wars going on, and there's starvation every few years, especially in these northern regions, and it's just things are just not going right. The government was broke really after fighting the Taipings and had not refilled its coffers, and Westerners were certainly trying to get footholds into China as a giant market to trade. But what happens is there's this rebellion. These Chinese peasants decide that Christians are the enemy, and there's lots of Chinese Christians. And it takes a long time. I could go into this in great depth, but basically they were anti-missionary and they're anti-Chinese Christian. And they killed some 10,000, maybe 20,000 Chinese Christians. They just went around slaughtering them, and they attacked all the churches and burned. And they were really big on burning telegraphs. And telegraph wires and trains. And they attacked Beijing. And the Chinese government was just so confused. They didn't know what to do. They supported the boxers at one point, and then they were anti-boxers, and at the moment when they actually supported the boxers, who came and attacked the foreign embassies in Beijing, the legation neighborhood, and for a short period, the government supported them. It's the Duan, actually, the guy, Prince Duan, who was famous for being the guy who like hosted Yang Luchan, the Tai Chi guy, was a huge like backer. He was like the Mr. Evil who backed the boxers against the foreign legation. And so the naturally, if all your embassies are attacked, 8 foreign countries, all of which were Christian except Japan, invaded. And and the Dowager Emperor has fled. And the thing I didn't tell you here is that the boxers were possessed by gods of the theater. They did these rituals, that these martial rituals, in order to become sort of theatrical superheroes like Guangong. People were possessed by Guangong and would charge into battle, probably with a halberd. And that was their whole thing. They were fighting for the theater, because Christians, right, were anti-theater. That was a huge thing about the Christians, because the theater was the pagan gods on the stage. And it was a major social structure organization. A lot of government was sort of organized around the theater. Really, like local government institutions were like, had names related to the theater. And so, yeah, there was these possessed, just like we were talking about earlier, this culture of possession. And that's how they fought. They fought in a possessed state. So in a sense, you could say the martial arts training, the base training, was for you to be able to handle fighting in a possessed state. It gave you a kind of base training that was, of course, you would practice playing these theatrical characters, so you knew them. So, but not just Guangong or UFA, both of whom were well-established fighters in the Boxer Rebellion, people. But the Monkey King was probably the most popular. And Nejia, the angry baby god, who was the patron saint of Beijing, or the defender of Beijing, was also in a god that was fighting for these foreigners, so that's just to explain that there was this. Basically, the boxers were demolished by Western guns and organization. And it was this massive humiliation for the Chinese people. And so throughout the 20th century, they have been trying to hide the fact that theater, religion, and martial arts were a single subject. And you really see, theater got hit really hard by this, where they tried to adapt Western methods. Even though there's this absolutely fantastic, elaborate theatrical tradition, they cut out as much religion as they possibly could. And they said, none of this is for real fighting. They just said that. Even though if you look at these guys, these top quality, even today, Beijing opera people, the first thing they teach them is fighting skill. It's the first thing before they learn to talk. It's like, okay, maybe they don't emphasize it anymore. I get, it's true, they don't emphasize it anymore, but they did, because they had to like travel the rivers and roads, in the worst parts of through banded territory. Of course they knew how to fight.
Yeah. So, if you want to learn the Chinese martial art today, does it matter? Do you need to connect to this hereditary of theatre and gods, and if I just want to learn some self-defense skills.
Self-defense. That's another subject, by the way. But go ahead, yeah.
But I'll talk about that.
Yeah, well, I just think people are delusional. Like, what's the subject again? like martial arts is this huge thing that's full of theater and religion. It's like, it's this big subject. There's so much to it. You get bit by it. And self-defense is cool. I can get pretty deep into just self-defense too, you know, but I mean, your first question is, how do criminals attack? Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
that's got to be your first question.
Yeah, the whole Rory Miller avenue of dealing with actual violence is very different to the kind of almost the pantomime violence you have in self-defense, like a typical self-defense class, which has a good guy and a bad guy, and you are the good guy, you defend yourself against the bad guy. And I mean, that the whole setup anyway is very theatrical to me.
Yes.
Right. And it doesn't, like you say, if you read people like Rory Miller, then it has very little bearing on the reality of violence and dealing with the emotional side effects, and what you know, and how that can change you, and all that kind of thing, the years of trauma afterwards, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but like, there's several ways we can go in this conversation. So I can go right into that and go, you know, Rory Miller's totally like, yeah, of course, that theater was part of martial arts. Like, you need theatrical skills. Like, you need good improvisational skills, you know, to deal with violence. Like, you know, your capacity to change who you appear to be is an extremely valuable skill in violent situations.
No, I found that really interesting in the book where you talked about this, the value of having theatrical skills to self-defense. It's something we just don't think about these days. But I think you said in the book at one point you've never really been involved in a kind of have to, you know, face real violence because you have very good skills of de-escalating it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm the same. I've never ended up in a situation where I faced like real actual someone trying to kill me, because I'm just not that sort of person. I'm quite affable. You know, I get on with people.
You are, by the way. You are. Even more than me.
Yeah, but I mean, I've never been taught to be affable, but it's obviously something I've developed just from growing up. That, I mean, I've never ever found myself like in the typical a fight in a bar or something, just because that's not the kind of person I am. But like you say, a lot of those skills you could get from other things. You don't have to get them from martial arts at all.
No, I went to very dangerous schools. You know, I remember in high school, I was in this sort of alternative program, and we're sitting, you know, there was three of us sort of like on the porch. I don't know, people were late for school or something.
Yeah.
So it was hippie era stuff, or post hippie, but influenced by that. And, you know, three of us were sort of sitting on this balcony waiting for people to show up, and there was Carlos, who was a gang leader, who was, you know, going to school with us. And I mean, one of the stories is he was on the bus, you know, because we had passes to go around. It was an alternative school, so we would be doing those sort of community service projects and stuff. So a couple of my friends were on the bus with him, and these guys get on with baseball bats, and they're like just gonna beat everybody, you know, who doesn't give them their money right away. And he's like, let's take them. You know, Carlos, let's take them. You know, and they're like, no, let's jump out the window. So, but you know, that's who he was. He was used to that. And so we're sitting there on the deck, and you know, and Ricky drives up, and this, you know, it's one of these big old cars, a cholo car, right? Or called lowrider. Drives up, and the teacher Wayne, the teacher says, you know, hey, Carlos says, are those bullet holes in the back of Ricky's car? And Carlos says, you know, you and I, you know, we like Ricky. Some people don't like Ricky. I mean, so I kind of been to these sort of like, you know, mafia schools. So I got to deal with some pretty dangerous people, pretty young.
Yeah, see, I didn't.
So, but yeah, you don't, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, the world is pretty safe. Yeah. But relatively, it's only gotten safer from my youth.
yeah, compared to the people that we're talking about in your book who lived in an
Yeah.
it's just dangerous. I mean, well, we have
Well,
no
kidnapping
control.
was really widespread, right? And how did you kidnap somebody in China? You threw a bag over their head, right, from behind,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And you just haul them off, and then you sell them. And you like kidnapping kids, right? So if it turns out they're really wealthy, you can ask the parents to to pay you to have the kid back. And you
yeah,
do that every once in a while you actually do give the kid back, right? So there's an incentive to pay. But most of the time you don't. You just sell them, and you take the money and you sell them down the road, or in another part of China, because the roads were good. You could transport kids, and that's pretty dark. And if you look at what Shaolin training was, I mean, yes, it was the theater training, but it's also fantastic anti-kidnapping training. I mean, one of the things that drives me crazy is what happened to, say, Northern Shaolin. If you look at Tantui, the springy legs, which was the first thing I learned.
I've done a tiny bit of that. Yeah.
Right. Well, so people were making fun of the style I learned, saying it's too opera. Actually, that's actually what I heard. It's one of the things that got me thinking, like, well, it's too opera. Like Adam Shu, who's back in Taiwan now, it said that about our style. Because the kicks are too high, and
Yeah, the Tantui bit. There's 10. Is it 10 lines? But they're very.
Tantui means springy legs.
Yeah, they're quite robotic, aren't they? It's very, very like a bit like what people think of as karate, in that there's a big punch and then a big kick, and then you stop and turn around and do it the other way.
Yes, except the style I learned, springy legs. That you get springy legs. Like really springy legs, and I see people doing it like stop it, right? It's really springy, and that's the key thing, is because your legs are springy, you're moving a lot of momentum. And that's the other thing about long arm positions. They're really great leverage points, and they're really great extension points. And you really think about, like, for kids fighting. But what I was gonna say is the thing that drives me crazy. I don't know if I can do this because I got a wall behind me.
Do it anyway.
But yeah, I can almost do it if I point it up. My style is all punch up, right?
Yeah.
Now you see them punch out like this.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, punch up, that is the best anti-kidnapping technique. You stand the ground and punch up. You look perfectly from behind, right?
Yeah.
So you punch this way, they move their head. Punch this way, and you get it, right? They put their head to the side, and bam, you get it. And there's stamps, and all the techniques, the beginning techniques. That stuff, it's for kids. I got a lot of that from just working with Rory Miller. Like, how do people attack? How do you stop these attacks?
Yeah, but I guess it's always going to put a bag on you from behind.
Yeah.
Having a reflex to punch up is kind of handy.
This move, right? Right?
Yeah, stopping at the bag or the hands grabbing. Yeah.
But also whatever, going to throw a rope around you, or even just grab you, right? There's basic grabs from behind. That is still the way criminals attack women. It's from behind.
Yes.
So we're not that far away from it. It was, well, anyway, my point is, it's really, the self-defense stuff is all there. The real, it's all built in to that stuff. Even the wild kicks are quite useful. It's just that people are always thinking in this matched fighting, two people who are the same, it's really hard to get a high kick in. Of course, high kicks do win competitions too.
Well, I mean, I used to think high kicking to the head was pointless. So that was the mantra I was given.
So you got knocked out by one?
No, I didn't, but I watched a lot of UFC, and like, I mean, 3 times a night, people are knocked out by high kicks that are useless.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they're not useless if you know how to do them.
Yeah. And also, if there's walls, like the butterfly kick, the butterfly kick is an absolutely fantastic kick. But I've never seen I've never seen it successful in an MMA fight, but just the practice of getting airborne in a butterfly kick, or you're getting airborne and then kicking off the wall, I mean, it's a fantastic technique. This is the one line that really helped me rethink everything that I got, again, from Rory Miller, which was that if you're in competition, you're mostly trying to control the other person. And controlling means reducing momentum. Even if you're working as a policeman, mostly what you're doing is trying to reduce the momentum to subdue the other person. In self-defense, if it's self-defense, you're losing. Pretty much just start from losing. So he'll start with, just, smash your head into the table. Okay, now let's start. Like, that's the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so now what do I do? Well, fight to a stance. It's a fantastic strategy. Fight to a stance that you've trained over and over. I was going to say something else. Just like butterfly kicks. Butterfly kicks add massive amounts of momentum to a fight. And if you're losing, add momentum. That's the rule. If you're losing, add momentum, because the person winning is trying to reduce momentum. So you add it. Or the other way he put that is, if you're on the edge of a roof and a really bad guy is choking you out, you're about to lose consciousness, take them off the roof with you. Roll off the roof with them. Because, well, if a really bad guy gets you unconscious, so you might not. You have a good chance of dying. But
that's a given, really. If that's why people tap, because that means you won. It doesn't mean it means you've just killed me. That's what tap means. I mean, if you break my arm, how do I fight you with one arm? I can't. You're going to kill me. So,
well, you can fight with one arm, and you can fight with.
I don't think you'd win.
That's the question. I mean, self-defense, of course. You keep fighting.
You'd have to if it was life and death. But I think your odds of winning are then significantly reduced because you're down to one arm.
It's a disadvantage.
It's a big disadvantage, yeah.
But that's self-defense. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Self-defense starts there.
But if you've got one arm,
starts with a broken arm.
If you've got one arm but you find a gun, then yeah, you're going to win.
Well, if you find one arm and you're on the edge of the roof and you kick them off, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, again, if you can get enough momentum, one arm is enough.
I do. I mean, we're getting way off track here, but
these things go into the neck. By the way, you can actually put one of these through the neck with just one hand.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, not that I've ever done it, but I've seen the Bourne Identity. I saw what he did with a pen.
Try it with meat with a steak if you got one in the fridge.
Who are these guys that puncture meat all the time? Some of my friends, they've gone into sword fighting and they're hacking up bottles and dead cows and things. And I don't know whether they've just eventually lost the plot or what, but each to their own. So
I don't know if you want this story, but I took this. I mean, it's a little bit distraction from my book, but I think, well, look, I'm really into Chinese martial arts. I've been into them since I was 10, and I'm 50 now. And
no way. I can't believe it.
And so, I really wanted answers to, like, where did the stuff come from? Because I just didn't buy any of the stories I was hearing about it being a pure martial art. There was too much theater in there. There was too much theatricality in the movement, and there was too much aesthetics as well. I mean, they were so beautiful. Tai Chi, Chen-style Tai Chi or Bagua, such beautiful movements as dance, but But yeah, I took this workshop here. I live in Colorado, and this guy Ed Calderon was coming through. He's one of those guys that like cuts. You can see videos of cutting meat.
What is it with these guys?
I mean, yeah, knife guys. You know, he's a knife and gun and fighting guys, and he's another one of these people. Like Rory Miller, he's young. He's 30. But he's Mexican. He was working on the border doing anti-kidnapping interdiction, and anti-kidnapping interdiction and anti-drug stuff.
What's interdiction?
It means stopping. Well, when someone gets kidnapped, you go after the kidnappers.
Okay.
And you're trying to figure out who the kidnappers are and who they're working with. A lot of times they're working with the police. So he was part of a special team that had its own funding source. And to be on this team, every single member of your extended family had to agree to have their finances publicly observed, because you didn't want anybody else on your team on the payroll of the cartels who were through corruption or connected to the police. If you escape from a kidnapper, you don't run to the police in Mexico because they'll take you back, or they might take you back. So I was just dark stuff, right? And I went to go do a half-day workshop with him because my friend who was really into knives recommended it. Maya Soderholm. And he starts at the feet, and he's showing foot techniques, mostly from Chinese martial arts, actually. And of course, I knew them all. It wasn't showing us anything new. And then he goes up the bar, he starts at the feet and goes up to the head. So he's just sort of showing techniques that have worked, and some of it he got from prisoners, and some of it but he had a lot of time to practice because he's busting in people's doors, every few days. I mean, for 5-10 years he's working, and there were 12 guys on the team, and I think 8 of them or so, I forget his numbers, but like 8 of them were actually kidnapped and tortured and murdered over that period he worked with them. I mean, it was high risk activity. This guy's a adrenaline junkie, and so a lot of violent experience, close quarters fighting, and winning. And of course, he's like, all about like, how do you get that knife out really fast? And what's the best knife to pull out fast? And that first day, so he's teaching me these techniques, all of which I've seen, until we got up to the mouth and face stuff. Then there was some stuff I hadn't seen. But the leg stuff I'd seen, and but.
Is this the breaking the leg?
It's like breaking legs, stepping on legs, kicking.
The stepping on, because I think I read a blog post you did about stepping on legs.
Yeah, you knock people over. Steps on people's feet and knocks them over. Steps on people's feet and knocks them over. It's like
step on feet. That's it. Yeah.
Right, and with shoes on, right, and no one ever does that. Like my technique is my most common like Chinese martial arts technique: step on their foot and hit them so that they fall over.
My Tai Chi teacher, that was like is basically his number one thing. Like whenever you'd spar with him, you go, oh, let's go, and then suddenly he was on your foot and you were falling over, and you hadn't even done anything, and he was just so good at putting his weight on your foot and the subtle angle. And once you're on the floor, he's standing over the top punching you, and that's it. You can't do it because he's trapped your foot.
When you do it to your student, if you're unless you're evil, you lift your foot up so they can adjust as they're falling. But if you keep your foot on their foot, it will break. Right? And I'm like, really, does it break? My first thought is, oh, really, does it break? And then I'm looking at techniques, and it suddenly occurred to me, oh my God, he's done this.
He's broken a leg before.
Yeah. And then I realized, I asked him, I said, so you've done this, haven't you? He just looks at me. You've done this how many times have you broken people's legs? And he's like, okay, let's keep going. And I'm like, listen, he's not answering the question. And it wasn't until a little bit later I realized how dumb my question was, because I did ask him. I did, he never had an answer. But he's like, it's way more than anybody, the numbers I would have counted. Long ago. No, what he said, he said, well, that's how we clear a room in Mexico. So, every day I'm breaking legs. And so, and so when you play with him, because I got to play with him too, you realize that, he's just incredibly gentle.
See, that's another thing I've noticed about martial artists is the ones who actually experience the real stuff are the softest to work with, because they've got nothing to prove. And it's the same in,
No, there's not because they have nothing to prove, because soft works.
Well, that's true as well. Yes. I mean, it's everything, isn't it? It's weakness, as you like to call it. It's embracing that whole thing. But especially in like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the people that compete the most, when they roll in the gym, give you the better rolls, because they're not trying to kill you. They're saving that for the competition. And the people that don't compete a lot, in the club, they're just continually trying to kill you. And it's although saying that, I'm a contradiction, because I don't really compete, and I don't like to think that I'm trying to kill people in the club. But I think it's a generalization that doesn't hold true for everybody. But there's definitely something to the fact that if you have to do this for real, you're not so concerned with doing it for real in your training. You're open to other ways of training that are better at building skill than just going hell for leather every time.
Yeah, so really simple, just like when I talk about head and neck stuff, just like getting the hand here and doing something, right?
Yeah.
Like if you use a lot of force and effort, you trigger the person's brain to resist. But the light, delicate movements, the people just will it works better. The light, delicate stuff, especially on these really vulnerable targets, it's absolutely amazing when you sort of get that revelation that these soft Tai Chi hands can do that.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us back to the point of what do you get from theatre and dance and mime and all these other things? Are these sort of skills?
Yes, right. Mime is absolutely like all over the Chinese martial arts, and if you just start watching, well, I studied Indian classical dance for 6 years. If you study you just watch videos of that or Chinese opera, you start to say, oh, the hand movements are like martial arts. They're really close. But I was actually going to say something. So, especially Tai Chi, but Bruce Lee too. When it comes to the West, we get this story that equanimity equals martial prowess. That the greatest calm, peace, the stroking the beard is like a demonstration of martial prowess. Which is, we have, this term in English, a gentleman. Gentleman was the one who could fight. Right? Historically, you were the one who defended your family, your entire name.
Yeah.
And
nice.
And we called them gentlemen. Interesting, because they knew it worked, right? And gentle actually works. And so that's but that idea that equanimity equals martial prowess is like, until you have hung out with people who've been deep in the violence, it just seems like a weird contradiction. But yet it's an enticing one, because we all went for it, right? Us young martial arts kids, like, wow, you mean I can be like really equanimitous and like that'll work? I mean, it's right. I'm working now on I wrote a Tai Chi book, and I realized it wasn't long enough. It's all this new stuff about the history of Tai Chi. And I have a Bagua book that's mostly written too. So I decided to put them together, and then I was like, oh, that means I have to explain what internal martial arts is as its own thing.
So this is your next book then?
Yeah, separate from the aesthetic, because Tai Chi and Bagua are actually really different aesthetics. But what if they're actually the same thing, but just different aesthetics?
Yeah.
Right. This is a question. But I just kind of hit on that. I was like, oh, yeah, they're basically pitching this ideal of equanimity as martial prowess. What an interesting idea.
But isn't there a lot of that to do with the Shaolin, the monastery approach to, monks doing martial arts? The kind of the complete contradiction of this peaceful person is actually this deadly fighter.
Yeah, it's all over the place. That's what I'm trying to say. I actually think it's worldwide.
Well, I think a lot of in the 70s, especially like that Kung Fu TV series, I think that influenced so many people. And I think it's given everyone the cultural idea that being a Zen monk means you're absolutely a deadly fighter. And I think that I mean, when I was growing up, that was the thing that what made me want to try martial arts was that TV program. I was too young to watch Bruce Lee. He was too violent, but Kung Fu, the David Carradine one, it was on TV on a Sunday and I could watch it. I mean, I look back on those episodes now and a lot of them are just nothing happens, and a bit of judo. And then nothing happens again. But at the time, it was mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, Shaolin Temple and Wudong, the Taoist monastery and Wudong were both centers of theater. They were theatrical centers. That's just, that's what a temple was. Like the gate to Wudong, Sean, was actually a theater. You had to they'd have on festivals, they'd have like a performance going on. You have to actually walk under. The gate was the theater entrance. You walk under the theater to enter the temple. They still have this in China. That's what, we think of a temple as this equanimitous place exclusively, but actually it was a rough, it was a
rough and tumble loud place, rather than
it was a place where you could see fights, on the stage before, for sure.
But the idea we're given in the West is very different. It's, we think of a monastery as being like a Western monastery where it's all very ordered and quiet and people are just being quiet all day and contemplating a higher thing. But maybe it's, the Chinese view was never like that.
No, they have that too, but you might call that the more the hermit tradition. And there's no question, so what a monastery is, in a sense, is the hermit, the institutionalization of the hermit tradition, right? So you have these sort of hermit cities, where you could kind of wander from cave to cave, and there's two hermits here, and they kind of know each other, and they share stuff once in a while, or they put a sign up like "Do not disturb" for 5 years, whatever.
I'm busy.
Those things sort of get institutionalized, and you get a princess comes along and decides to endow a particular teacher, and then he gets a lot of followers, and then acquires land, and you have a monastery.
Cool. Well, I think we're going to the hour mark, so we should probably wrap up. I feel like there's
forever.
I know we should make this a series. Maybe we could do one a month. I think. So I look forward to your next book. This one, Possible Origins, is on sale now. It's a really good read. There's so much in here that you could read it about 10 times, I think, and still get something new every time. Thank you very much for talking to me, and maybe we'll do this again, because I do feel like we could just keep going for a while.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. Take care, man.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.